Okay, I live with a mother and a grandmother. Um, I grew up with a sibling, my sister, Doris Crenshaw, and a brother, a little younger, about 10 years younger, John Allen McLeod. And I guess key to the movement is the fact that my sister and I rode the Montgomery bus line. So we experienced on a daily basis during school the harassment that came from the bus driver. And so I guess that inspired us, or it was something in us that made us relate to. Yes, in fact, my sister was the one who introduced me to Mrs. Parks as we joined the NAACP youth group. My sister was vice president. I was just a member of that group. She would have us into her home, and she taught us that we were important. I can remember that. And that it was key that we learn our rights, and that voting was an important aspect of our lives. And I can just remember those things about the conversations that she had with us. And she also taught us that it was important to carry yourself in a good, responsible way. After we would meet, she would give us Kool-Aid and cookies. Yeah, she was like a leader of the bunch, and whatever she did, basically I did. There was a difference in us in that I was mostly interested in the music portion of things that happened, and she was more of the leadership fighter type movement person. But she somehow had interest from a very young age in rights and what was right for you. And she led me down that path. I was 11 years old when the boycott started. From that experience, I know that the youth, and this is not often said, had their own kind of individual movement, that we kind of led ourselves around what was happening with the movement, and that we organized ourselves to get across what we call across town when we were no longer riding the buses. And we had to find our own way for survival. My sister, being the leader that she was, wouldn't allow us ever to go and get a ride. She said we'd be taking up space from an adult, and we were going to walk. So the 361 days there was school, we walked. It was a joyous feeling, of course, and no longer we felt that we had to take the abuse that we had experienced on those buses since I was 6 years old, because I started to ride the bus at age 6 and had done that to age 11. And we found our ways to survive through that. It was piercing to see adults have to leave the bus and go around to pay their money and then get off the bus and come to the back of the bus. I almost never had to do that because we were the first stop. So we always found ourselves with a seat. But curious as we were, there were times we tested to see what would happen if we sat in the front of the bus. And we did. And then they would ask us, of course, when one white lady got on the bus, I can never forget her. She had red hair, long hair, and when she entered the bus, we would have to get up, even though there were a number of seats, and she was the only white to get on that bus. So I think that was so piercing to us that I never forgot it. And when the bus boycott started, of course, that lived within me. And I knew that I would walk 300 and however many days actually that it would take. And to a 6-year-old, you just basically are so curious about why is it that we have to get up. That often I would sit behind her, and she would choose the same seat each time she got on the bus. This white woman, I don't know her name, I just remember her face and her red hair. But when she got on the bus, I decided several times to just feel her hair, see if I could put my little fingers on the top of the seat to see if it was a difference. What is the difference with her and the rest of us? And I did. I would just kind of feel that hair like it was an accident. I don't know what I concluded from that, except that it just gave me a feeling that I feel she's really no different. This hair is not so much different from ours. And that was just my little childhood curiosity and how I answered it. So that just that one white lady put such curiosity in me. And I wanted to answer that so much that I knew that I was going to walk the length of the time it would take for us to get to our goal. Started singing. We were elementary school students at Alabama State Laboratory High School. And each Friday, we would have I would call it a talent show. And we formed this group, 3 girls, actually it was four of us from the beginning, formed this group so that we could compete each Friday in the talent contest. Somehow it was something in us that made us want to do freedom songs. And I can't answer today why we chose that, because we're about the same age as Diana Ross. But when we went outside to practice, we practiced freedom songs. And that's what we would sing. So when the Montgomery Bus Boycott came, we formed this group at around the age 9 and 10. We were kind of ready. And so because of the songs we were singing, it lent itself to the movement. We were asked to come to sing at practically every tea that was held in Montgomery. You know, during that time, they had a lot of teas that raised money for the movement, as well as other things for the churches. And they would invite us to come, and I felt like it couldn't be a tea, or they felt like they couldn't have a tea if we didn't come. So we went all over town to teas on Sunday to participate. And we were kind of carrying the message of the movement through our songs. And we were relevant for the time, and that's why they called on us. It was Gladys Carter, because we formed the group, and we, all through high school, we kept the group. Gladys Carter and Minnie Hendricks, now McCants. We were the 3 girls who lasted among the 4. We decided we were going to not only practice at school, but we would practice at each other's homes. And that's how the 4th girl dropped out, because her parents wouldn't allow her to come each evening, or the evenings that we had set for practice. And we would sing in church, but because we mostly sang at school at first, because we all went to different churches. Mine was Mount Zion AME Zion Church. None of us were members of Reverend King's church. Minnie McCants was a member of Reverend Abernathy's church. I was with Reverend Say, who had the first meeting for the Montgomery Bus Boycott. And he was very active. As a matter of fact, there are things in your life that cause you to, I guess these sum total of things cause you to be whatever you are in life. And he talked each Sunday about accomplishments they had made toward needs of the black community. And I would hear what he had to say. So that was one of the influences that I had in terms of my life and fighting for freedom or struggle. I did. But that was before high school. It was like junior high, I think it was. But I was singing along with my sister being very active. We were selected to go to do a kind of like a cultural exchange in terms of our music. We would share the kind of songs that we were singing, and Guy Carroll headed up the workshops, and people from around the world, actually, because we met people from Africa there, would share the kind of movement songs they were doing. It was because our repertoire of songs, of freedom songs, were great and extensive that he asked that we come to New York to do freedom songs to raise money for the movement, Southern movement. And that's how we got to Carnegie Hall with Reverend Shuttlesworth and others to do that fundraiser. And from that came one of the first albums of civil rights songs to be used for fundraising and that kind of thing. And so we were the Montgomery Trio. We did not have a name. We went all over Montgomery before that time. Never thought about a name. They would just say the girls. We got to have the girls, or the girls this. And when we got there, they said, for this album, you got to have a name. So we debated about what could be our name and came up with the Montgomery Gospel Trio. I want to say after, around 16, what happened is that Montgomery, when you have a large-scale movement like that, quite often there are a lot of wounds that occur. So Montgomery, particularly the adults, could not sit down sometimes in the same room, let alone talking about a movement. And so the youth were used. So when James Bevel and all the people came into Montgomery, and by the way, we did meet James Bevel and Bernard Lafayette were the other group that came to do the concert at Carnegie Hall. So we had already met them. But they came into Montgomery first with the Freedom Riders. And so because we knew them, we had gone to Reverend Abernathy's house and waiting to get the cue to go pick up the Freedom Riders as they came in, because at that time we still active in movement and still singing. And Mrs. Abernathy said, we don't have anybody to pick them up. Now, a lot of adults will tell you that they did, but that day we stole a car. We said, well, we got to go find a way to get the Freedom Riders. And there was a girl, her name was Antoinette Carson, and she had her license at the time. And her grandfather would leave his car in the garage every day So we schemed together and said we were going to steal his car and go pick up the Freedom Riders. And we did. We said, how in the world are we going to get this car back in here? So what we did was we took some chalk, school chalk, and marked where the tires of his car were. And took the car, picked up the Freedom Riders, went back and put that car right in the tracks of those marks that we had made. And it was such an eventful day to see how they were beaten and how they were treated when getting off of those buses. And we had a carload up when we left. It's something about youth that even when you have fear, and it's something about having lived that kind of life, that your fear is bundled and it's there, but it does not outweigh the need to participate. So that there were times when we had fear. In fact, the night that the Freedom Riders came in, we went to the church, carried them to the church, and we were there for the mass meeting that night. And when we went in, there were no whites. When we sat there a while, the church was completely surrounded. As far as you could see were white, mostly males on horses and carrying long guns and sitting outside waiting on us to come out. And that was the night that we in fact spent the night at the church. So it was a fearful night, but not enough fear to stop us from doing what we needed to do. I was just going to say that Reverend Say said that night to me, we were eating, some food had come in, sandwiches and that kind of thing, and he was sitting on the steps at the church on the inside. And I said, Reverend Say, what are we going to do? Because as far as we could see were all these people surrounding us. And he said, we're going to do like the doodle bug. And I said, what do you mean? He said, doodle bug, because he called me doodle bug quite a bit. We're going to do like the doodle bug. And I was an adult before I really understood what we were saying, but we played this game in Montgomery, and we would sing the doodle bug song. It was back, a back, doodle, back, back. Your house is on a fire. Your children's burning. Back, a back, doodle, back, back. And I had to think about it as I became an adult, because I really didn't know at the time what he was saying. I thought about how that song said, your house is on a fire and you're in trouble, but you're going to be just like the doodle bug. And the doodle bug, when we were singing that song, the doodle bug would back up, just back out of the sand. And as if he was so small, but as if to say, I'm protecting my own. Well, actually, the Freedom Singers, as you know them, I was not a part of that group. I joined after leaving the Montgomery Trio, but remember I went to school at Alabama State University, so that we kept the group, and so did the other two girls. And so we kept the group going during the time that we were fighting for voter registration and that kind of thing. I may have mentioned that a lot of that was done by the youth, because a lot of adults no longer wanted to participate for whatever their reasons were. So when James Belville and those people came into Montgomery, they called on us to sing before the meetings that we would have in the rural areas as well as in the city of Montgomery. So we would travel around with them and we do the singing. at the churches. So we kept our group, the Montgomery Trio, going up until that time. And after which, I came to Atlanta, got with Bernice Reagan. It started, I guess I have to back up to say that she had asked that I participate in what they call the Penny Festival. And that's where the community and the school, there was so much separation that they had formed this Penny Festival to come together with the community to put on a performance each year. And SNCC did that. And when Bernice Reagan asked me to participate, we did the music for that first Penny Festival that we were doing. And after, I said, goodness, I haven't been singing, and this was so good to participate in this kind of thing. So myself, along with another singer that was in the Harambe Singers, Maddie Casey, Pierce now, went to Bernice's house, knocked on the door and said, we'd like to just continue to sing. Let's continue to sing. And thus was started the Harambe Singers. So I wasn't in that Freedom Group Singers with Bernice, but in the Harambe Singers with her. It depended on what was happening at the time. That determined what we would sing and what message we would, because we learned at Highlander that these songs not only could carry a message for the movement in Montgomery, but songs carried the message of the movement wherever. And that when we went to Highlander, we would sing and our songs, This Little Light of Mine, which became one of the famous songs of the movement. And it's interesting to note that we were singing that for the movement at 11 years old, and became one of the songs on the album that we did. But that was one of the important songs we thought. We Are Soldiers in the Army was one of the songs we did. Old Freedom. So we were doing all of these songs at 11 years old for the movement, songs which later became the bulk of the songs and the basis of the songs for that upcoming civil rights movement. I sing basically the melody, but we did interchange, and I do a lot of the lead singing on the songs, or the verse singing. I do want to say a bit more about Highlander and how our songs began to change as we attended those workshops with Guy Carrollton and all. If you go back to the songs, you'll see that we were singing songs, but basically we didn't write the song. There is a Montgomery song that represents that movement that was written by one of the professors at Alabama State, which for me, for that era, was the first actual song that was written for movement. And I like to get that in because people think it happened later on, but no, right at that time, he wrote that song. But when we went to Highlander, we were singing some of the songs, basically, the freedom songs, basically as they were done traditionally. And we are traditional singers. And we would add a word in a verse or a line to represent our movement. Or sometimes we would change a line. But we weren't actually changing whole songs until actually we got there to Highlander and saw others do it. And then we thought we were equipped. We were going back then, writing songs and doing our own, version of the songs. But we kept it traditional in terms of how we would sing the song. So if you hear our album or any of those things, you see we kept Sometimes now when I'm singing it, we are performing that song, people look and say, did y'all say hell? Yes, that's the way he wrote the song, because he wrote it from a traditional song that I think that song is Ain't Gonna Rain No More. And in that song it says, how in the hell do the old folk know it ain't gonna rain no more? And he said, how in the hell don't the white folk know we ain't gonna ride them buses no more? You know what? I don't know how much light I can place on that, because you have to remember that I was at Highlander when I was probably 14 years old. And we weren't thinking at the time, oh, I said this, I did this. That was not upon our minds. So that I can remember that when we went to Highlander, we had workshops to prepare us for different things that we would face. And one of the things that Reverend Say, who drove us there, said to us is that we're going to leave by night. And the reason for that is when you get into Montgomery, Tennessee, the population of blacks, the population is just one, and that was Septima Clark. And so to go in by night, we would not be noticed as we would go in. So we went there by night and we came back by night. The city came in. We were having a movie, I believe, that night, Song Fest, and they came in, they turned out all the lights from the city. They turned them out. So we were in complete darkness that night. And we could not see each other. We didn't know where, I didn't know where my sister was. I didn't know where Minnie was. We were just there, wherever we were at the time when the lights went out, you know. That's where we sat. And so all these policemen came in, and all we could see basically is the billet club waving, and the butts of their guns, you could see it shining from their holster. And they told us to sit, you know, of course, stay seated, be quiet, or what have you. And something said, we are not afraid. And everybody started singing, we are not. And you could hear people come in. My sister, who is not a singer, I knew she was safe because I heard her little out-of-tune voice coming in. And I could hear Minnie's bass come in about we are not afraid. And we got louder and louder with singing that verse until one of the policemen came and he said to me, if you have to sing, and he was actually shaking, do you have to sing so loud? And I could not believe it. Here these people had all the guns, the billy clubs, the power, we thought. And he was asking me with a shake if I would not sing so loud. And it was that time that I really understood the power of our music. How powerful it was, that it unnerved him so much that he had to come and ask that I not sing so loud. And I can just tell you that I got louder and louder. And somehow, even the nature out there in that darkness, because everywhere was dark, but it looked like our voices blended that night to the point of complete harmony and beauty. And from then on, I knew exactly how powerful our songs were. There are a number of them, but I can say that we were in Montgomery. I was in college at the time. And we would, King was going to take us from his church. He was no longer living there at the time, but he had come back for, I can't even remember what the movement was all about. But we were going to march to the Capitol in Montgomery. And as we got to the top of the steps, and you saw all of these the people had taken, the males had taken off their shirts, and they were just bare-chested, standing up there with rifles and riding their horses. And again, I faced these horses coming down on you. And when I got to the top of the steps, it made me sing that verse again. We are not afraid, and we started singing it. Now, I can tell you that my knees were actually shaking that day when I looked out to see all of them. And we were going to, try to march to the Capitol. But singing that song and that verse helped to kind of steady those knees at that time. And I can remember that particular verse at that time and that particular movement. Well, those college days were spent. As I said, SCLC had formed and sent James Bevel and James Orange into Montgomery. And what we worked on at the time was voter registration again, even though I had handled voter registration at 12 years old with Mrs. Williams in Montgomery. And during my high school days, we just continued that whole thing of going to Kings Hill. We ventured out into other places besides Montgomery, because Montgomery was so tight at that time after having gone through that Montgomery Bus Boycott. And the other thing we were working on was sit-ins. And so we would go to the church and plan as youth with James Bevel and James Orange how we were going to go to the 5 and 10 cent stores. And they taught us at that time, they had gone through training sessions on how to protect your head and that kind of thing, and what happens if someone spits on you. And really they taught us nonviolence to a great extent. And so those were the kind of things that we worked on. But let me just go back and say, at 12 years old, Miss Rosa Parks and Mrs. Williams taught us how to fill out 27-page questionnaires so that we could go into the homes of adults and teach them how to fill out those questions to become voters. That's what you had to do at the time. Just silly, stupid kinds of questions. We had to learn the preamble to the Constitution. But they set us in a little shop behind her house. She was a hairdresser, and the youth would go in there, sit on the floor, and we'd learn how to fill out these, at 11, fill out these and answer the questions. And we would knock on doors and teach adults how to fill it out. Personally, I started paying more attention to, I guess, what we call Black Power and the Pan-Africanist movement. And so the songs that we performed as Harambe singers were what we call very radical type songs, move on over, or we'll move on over you. And the songs took a different tone and became also international. We were very in tune to our heritage at the time. And as I said, Black Power. And so when we went, our hair was afroed and this kind of thing. And our songs took on some of that same mentality at the time. In terms of the songs, Hands Off and Kruma was one of the songs that we did, because at that time, as I say, we had a Pan-Africanist perspective to what we were doing in song. And so that was important to us as the movement was going on in Ghana. We did do that song of Hand Off and Kruma. That's what the people say, hands off and Kruma. And we talked about the CIA in the song. So we started attacking other elements of not only this country, but the world. Our community was filled with people who had participated in struggle in some type way. We had Flora Grant, who had one of the large debits in Atlanta Life Insurance Company, and who kept herself close to movement things that's happening in the community, who would come to my home and sit with my mother to talk about those things as I sat under the table and they played cards. But and I would hear a lot at that time because she was very knowledgeable as to the kind of current things happening in the Montgomery community. And we had the young lady who wrote See How They Run. We had Sullivan Rogers, who was one of the first black jockeys. And we saw him train his horses, and he would tell us stories. And we had my aunt, who lived with us, and her name, we called her Bessie B. Now, Bessie B was the storyteller in my family, and she would tell us about all kinds of struggles. And the story that I remember from her was about old John. And when she talked about old John, she said that he worked hard from sun up to sundown to take care of his family, But at the end of the day or the week, he had no meat. He had very little food. And it would bother him so much that he had taken care and raised the food for his owner as he sharecropped. But he could not pay his bill at the end of the week. And so old John found ways to every so often get his family a chicken. And she told us the story of how John trained his younger son to come with him as they would get one chicken from the white folks' chicken coop. And he said, John, this night I'm going to teach you how to prize. And you're going to prize the chicken coop while I go under and get this one chicken. Because there's something about black families that told them that they would get whatever it was to survive, but not more than that. And so he would get this one chicken for his family. So he carried little John, I guess was about the age of 12, I think she told us. And they would get this long stick to pry up the chicken coop. And this particular night, he was saying, prize boy, as John was shaking and almost to drop the chicken coop before John could get the chicken from the chicken coop. And he did. It was prize boy, prize. And my aunt would just shake all over in her voice as she was telling the story about prize boy. And he dropped the chicken coop, could no longer hold it. And John said, run, boy, go tell your mama you done lost your prize. And so later on in life, from that story, I never forget that John could not feed his family, working from sun up to sundown. And something in my head did not, set well. with the fact that he couldn't feed his family and that story. So later on, I wrote a song that says, prize boy, prize boy, prize boy, prize, run fast, go tell your mama John done lost his prize. So the people in the community, and as I say and tell young people, the sum total for what you select to do in life will determine your life. And I think it was the sum total of these people and their impact on our lives that kept us even today, as I sit here 67 years old, still involved in fighting for freedom. So is those kind of things, and I tell even seniors today, I work with seniors, that we have to keep ourselves close to the young people, because it's the older people that had this impact in our lives that caused us to be the people that we are today.